Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Kelly, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about the history of competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee. Yeah! All right. We'll get to Fox. So, Melee was released in 2001, 2002. It was a sequel to Smash 64 for the N64, which is really kind of a prototype game. It was a proof of concept, but it sold way better than anyone was expecting because it was so goddamn good. So, about 2 years afterwards, they released a sequel for the GameCube. And the thing about this sequel is that it had more characters, more stages, and it was also, okay, those GIFs are weird, but it was also faster. It was a more dynamic kind of playing game. It was intended to be more of a party game, where people can just pick up a controller, play, button mash, and have a great time doing it. But while this was happening, there was also whenever you have a competitive game, a competitive fighting game, you're always going to get people who take it very seriously. So in 2002, a couple of these people came together and created the Smash World Forums, which is today known as Smashboards. This was a forum for people to come together and talk about the game. They would talk about characters, they talk about movesets, strategies, all that kind of stuff. And this was really the beginning of the structures that you usually see around a competitive fighting game. Like Street Fighter II had blazed the path for this, but this started coming around in terms of Melee. One of the first things that really came about was what's known as a tier list. So a tier list is basically a list of all the characters ranked by their effectiveness. This is a general kind of thing, but the top four, Fox, Falco, Marth, and Sheik, wow, a lot of Sheik mains here, they have basically been the top since the beginning because they are extremely versatile, they are extremely fast. You can do a lot of things with these characters, and this is really where the high-level play took place on those characters. So, in addition to the tier list and character, the characters in which were the best, they also developed a very kind of robust way of dissecting these characters. They would look at frame data, they'd look at the animations, they'd create all these different strategies and movesets that were either, intended by the game or in some cases, not quite bugs, but like little kind of exploits to the game that allowed you to play the game at a much higher level. And one of these things that was discovered very early on was a technique called wave dashing. So, man, these gifts are not great. Wave dashing is essentially this move. You jump up very quickly and diagonally dive down into the ground. This allows you to skid across the ground and change your position. This sounds really, really dumb, but there's an advantage to this. If you're moving towards an opponent, you can do dash attacks. You can only do dash attacks. But if you're wave dashing, the game does interpret you as standing. So you can do standing attacks, tilt attacks, and dash attacks, depending on what the situation needed. And allowing for that versatility is really what made it like a very high-level method of play. But the main thing that Smashboards did, aside from like the codification of all this information, was tournaments. People wanted to prove that they were the best, and so people would set up tournaments. And some of the earliest tournaments were just straight up in a dude's house. So this is Matt Deasy. He put on Tournament Go in, I believe it was San Diego. And he would just straight up invite people. It's like, hey, I'll put you up for the weekend. Everyone pays a buy-in, and the pot goes to the winner. And, a lot of people came there. It was weird, but it was the early 2000s, whatever. So as this scene developed, as Tournament Go developed, one person kind of rose to the top. And that was a guy by the name of Ken. Ken Huang was essentially a Marth main and a very, very adaptable player. He could basically read an opponent very, very well and adapt to what they were doing and beat them. He just dominated the scene on the West Coast. He rose to the top But at the same time, the East Coast was erupting in crews of Melee players. So there were a couple of different crews. Up here is Deadly Alliance, which is a New York-based crew, which they're actually still active today. And down around the DC, Virginia area, there was a team H2YL, which stood for Haha You Lose, and Team Ben. So they basically started the whole tradition of crew battles. They'd go to each other's towns and basically pit 5 against 5 stocks, and whoever lost all their stocks first lost. But as this kind of crew battle thing was going on, there was also a very singular player who rose to the top of the East Coast, and that was a guy by the name of Azen. Azen was an incredibly adaptable player because he played fucking every character. He was known actually as the master of diversity because he would pick up a character like breathing and just beat you to death with them. He would very famously take top tier players on with Pichu, who was a very low tier character. Yeah, I hear the groans. And he would just basically destroy you with Pichu. So with this East Coast, West Coast rivalry going on, and I hit the wrong button. Come on. All right, well, so there was an East Coast, West Coast rivalry going on. Ken in the West, Azen in the East. And the West Coast crew, Tournament Go, invited the East Coasters out, say, all right, come out, we'll play, and we'll determine who's the best. East Coast came out and got killed, like just straight up. But the reason they got killed and the reason that they started protesting this essentially was items. West Coast rules said items were on during the game, and these items were exceedingly random, like to the point where they considered it unfair. If a bomb spawned like on you while you're doing a combo and you got knocked off the stage, that didn't seem fair. That's not a test of skill. So they kind of protested it and said, you know what? We're going to throw our own tournament in Virginia. And H2YL created Game Over and invited the West Coast crew out. And they actually put a special pot that's saying if you're out of state and you win, you get an extra $300. So the West Coast crew came out, and a weird thing happened. Ken lost. Ken lost to a guy named Chillin, who is, oh, we're gonna get to better names, don't worry. Chillin was part of H2YL, and he was a good player, not necessarily top tier, but he knocked Ken down to loser bracket. And it was weird because Ken had never lost. This was his first major tournament loss. And everyone started looking at this as, you know, oh, he's just a paper tiger. Like, he's all talk, and when, you know, it's actually on the line, he ain't shit. So Azen, in the meantime, was tearing through winner's bracket. He ended up winning the winner's bracket against Isaiah, who was Ken's doubles partner, who they thought was the real threat in the doubles match, but apparently not, because Ken just beat him straight up. So according to the rules of the tournament, and this is true nowadays as well, when you're knocked down to loser's bracket, you can fight back to win your way back to the grand finals. And that's exactly what Ken did. He tore through loser's bracket, beating members of DA, beating Chillin, who had knocked him down in the initial battle, and he beat his partner Isaiah. And that just set up Ken versus Azen in the grand finals. Now, under these rules, Azen was in the winner's bracket, so he had to win one best-of-5 series. Ken, because he was coming through loser's bracket, had to win 2 best-of-5 series to reset the bracket and win outright. And that's what he did. Ken won straight sets against Azen and was pretty much the undisputed champion of Smash at the time. So, while all these tournaments are going on underground, like there's a huge amount of energy around it, and people started to take notice, notably Major League Gaming, which was a very early esports group. They'd put on tournaments and all that kind of stuff, and have these things go on, as part of like a straight up like a, season of tournaments. And they invited all the pro players, said, come on out, we want to, like, again, run a pro circuit. And Ken absolutely fucking dominated. He came to be known as the King of Smash because of all the 50 major tournaments he entered, he won 40. And he never placed below 5th except once. He was absolutely playing on an entirely different level, and he became known as the King of Smash. So when this happens though, when you're at the top and you're winning so consistently, people hate you. And he was getting a lot of flack from a lot of people, because if you're that dominant, they want to see the underdog win. And as a result, a group of new players came in and decided that they're going to challenge Ken for the championship. So these dudes, I said, we're going to get to even better names, I promise you. PC Chris, who was kind of revolutionized how Falco was played, got his name from being from Port Chester, New York. Korean DJ was a very aggressive, very fiery type of player. And Mewtwo King was just kind of perfect technically. He knew how to do these combos because he practiced them incessantly. And he really rose to the top on the back of that technical skill. So in 2006, all these players were in the mix, and it ended up in the finals at the Red Rock Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. This was the end tournament of the 2006 season. And they invited a very small group of people, and it was really Ken and the old guard, Ken as in a dude named Hugs, and the new blood that went in. The new blood won. And it took all three of them basically to knock Ken down. PC Chris took it, Korean DJ came in second, and Ken ended up in third. And Ken, in interviews afterwards, said he was more or less okay with this, because pretty much shortly after this, he retired. He said, it's not fun anymore. People are always gearing for me to lose. People are yelling at me constantly. I don't want to do this. As it turns out, he kind of left at the exact right time, because in 2007, Major League Gaming dropped Melee. They had gotten a sponsorship from Microsoft, and Microsoft wanted to push games like Halo 2 and Gears of War. And the Melee scene was kind of on the way out, lower attendance to a degree. Major League Gaming had a kind of an underground tournament scene for Melee, but the biggest reason that they kind of dropped it was something that was going to happen in 2008, and that was the release of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the sequel to Melee that was coming out on the Wii. And the Melee team, Melee community was like, oh great, we've been playing this game for a very long time, it's cool to get some new stuff in. So when this came out, more characters, more stages, more everything, the Melee team kind of switched over to it for a little bit because they started noticing things about Brawl. Please work. Close enough. So, you can't really tell it from this, so bear with me, but Brawl was much slower. Brawl was kind of about spacing and distance and all that kind of stuff, and not really fun to watch. While Melee was fast, frenetic, and really required a lot of discipline from the players that were playing it. And so the Melee crew was like, well, we don't want to play this. This is not fun for us. And as a result, because everything was shifting over to Brawl, the Melee community kind of went, not quite underground, but it was very much reduced in emphasis. This is known as the Dark Ages of Melee. I'm not kidding. But it's also known by another name, and that name is the Era of the Five Gods. Because these were the guys that rose to the top during the Dark Age when Melee was very much underground. The passion of the community was really sustaining this game. You'd had people like Mewtwo King, who was, as I mentioned before, a very great technical player. Mango, who was probably the best player of Melee ever, but also was pure chaos incarnate. He would basically do crazy shit and people didn't know what to do about it. Armada, who was a Swedish smasher, came over from Europe to participate in the US. Very good in terms of a defensive game. Like, you couldn't get in on this guy, and if you did, and you did it wrong, he would punish. PPMD. His name was originally Dr. PP. I told you the names would get better. PPMD was really good at the neutral game. He could work positioning in such a way to goad you into a mistake. And Hungrybox, who was a Jigglypuff main, was kind of a lower tier character, but he kind of revolutionized how it was used. And a very patient player, very deliberate player. But the problem is, like, even with this era of the five gods, it was still kind of a dark time for Melee because there's no major tournaments. So in 2009, a couple people came together and created a tournament called Revival of Melee. They knew Melee was on the way out, but they wanted to like show Melee and go out with a bang. Like, we know this game is great. We know this game can do incredible things, and we want to have one last big tournament. So they did, and something strange happened. It's called Match 4. Match 4 was between Mewtwo King and another player named Shiz, and it's currently one of the most viewed matches on YouTube. I'm just going to play you the whole match right now. Yep, I got it. Currently tied. Shiz is up by a stock. At this point, Mewtwo King is down 3 stocks to 1. He can't die once before he kills Falco 3 times, or he's out.
Wait, who the fuck said that second blood was the best match
No Johns means no excuses, named after a guy named John who would just make up excuses as to why he failed. That was game 4. It may not be the best match of Melee ever played, but it really lit a fire into the Melee community saying, like, this game is still fucking cool. Look at what we can do here. And that kind of sustained them for a number of years, until about 2013, when EVO, the biggest fighting game championship out there, announced their lineup. They usually announce 8 games, but they only announced 7 to start. And they said, you know what, for the 8th game, we're gonna do a donation drive. Whichever game community donates most to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, your game is going to be on the main stage in the biggest fighting game tournament basically ever to that point. Melee was on there, and the Melee community just went nuts. They said, this is our chance to get Melee on the main stage. So they would host essentially like telethons via streaming, where they'd get people to donate. Like some of the gods, this is Hungrybox here in the top right, would say one-on-one training if you donate this much. Ken came back and out of love of the game started saying like donate to this cause. And it worked. Melee raised over $94,000 for breast cancer research. Skullgirls, which was their closest competitor, did about 80, and the whole thing was about 250,000 all told. And Melee was back on the big stage. They were incredibly excited about this. People signed up for this thing, and it was easily going to be the most attended Melee tournament of all time. Until 3 days before the event, Nintendo shut it down. Nintendo said, this is our IP, we have a more recent game in the market that we're trying to sell. We are sending a cease and desist your way, you cannot stream this game. The Melee community was first in disbelief, and then they were fucking furious. How fucking dare you? This is a game we've kept alive all these years, and you are saying we can't do this? Screw you. And there was this huge social media and email backlash against Nintendo. And it was on a scale that basically no one had really seen before. And Nintendo basically reneged 5 hours later. They said, oh shit, fuck, oh we didn't know. So yeah, cool, do your thing. So EVO 2013 was on, and this was basically the biggest point in Melee's history. It was, the finals were watched by over 150,000 people. There were also thousands of people in the casino watching these folks. And it ended up in the finals between this guy here on the far left, a guy named Wobbles, who played Ice Climbers, kind of an old school smasher, and Mango, who was basically one of the gods. And this is the final game of EVO 2013. Mango won EVO 2013. All the gods were in attendance. It was basically the best of the best that went to this tournament. The biggest tournament, the biggest pot. And at this point, Melee entered its real renaissance. Tournament attendance ever since EVO 2013 has risen. It is currently one of the most popular played games on Twitch. And Melee is basically back. So when I think about Melee and what I think about this community, I really think about the people involved. Like, these are people that were dealt, like it is a game that they loved so much and saw so much in that very few people see. And it was really like the passion for that game and the ability to show that game to other people and show how fucking cool it could be. And the people they met and all that, it's kind of remarkable to me that the community, the passion that the community had really sustained through the dark times and now into the platinum age, as they call it, where it's more and more viewed and played. And I love that video games can do this, that they can create a community of people and cause them to meet and create new connections they never could before while doing something cool. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Go to nerdnite.com to find a Nerd Nite event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.